Welcome back to Highly Successful Couples. I'm your host, Nick Solacek, and today I am joined by the most special, important guest that we could possibly have on the show, my own partner. Because if you want to have a successful relationship, you can't do it on your own, and I certainly haven't. I've needed the support of Alissa in moments of conflict, disagreement. I've needed her to help me grow and point out things that I don't see, and she's needed the same. So I'd like to welcome Alissa.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people listening to the show that have questions about relationships. And, in our conversation about you coming on here, we thought that it would be really helpful to talk about our journey together. Because when I do Q&A and I hear from couples and I work with couples in my private practice, I hear them struggle with and talk about things that we wrestle with or we've been through. Things like moving in together, moving too fast, not seeing changes in the relationship as quickly as they want to see it. Baggage from our life or our childhood or our previous relationships, coming up. And how do we deal with our wounds, triggers, insecurities, and fears? And so you and me have been on the ground, practically working on things, in the trenches. So I thought maybe we could offer some perspective to our listeners, our audience, and share a little bit more about us.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think we'll just go back to the beginning, because when you and I got together, we did some things that many people would argue or agree that maybe you shouldn't do, which is move in too fast or move too quickly or, fall into certain traps that people do when they live in a high pressure modern city where things are expensive. A lot of couples are quick to move in together to save expenses, to try to combine their resources and make things easier. All that makes sense. But I think for someone in my position who's on this podcast all the time talking about what works in relationship, one of the things that I'm constantly talking about is, hey, first of all, the perfect partner doesn't exist. And second, I'm not perfect, even though I'd like to be, or I'd like everybody to think that I've got it figured out. And I've made some mistakes. We've made some mistakes we look back on. We say, oh, maybe we wish we would have done that different. And when we got together, you and I were both fresh out of previous relationships. Relatively so, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd really call when I was in a relationship.
Yeah.
It was
a situationship?
It was confusing, yeah.
Yeah.
It was more of a situationship. And before that, my previous partner had died.
Yeah.
And so I was more in a coping phase when you and I got together.
Yeah. So you were in a situationship. I was in a relationship. We were both out of those. We met. Things were hot and heavy. There was a lot of chemistry, a lot of charge. We were just completely in love and infatuated with each other, as many couples are in the honeymoon phase. And quite quickly, within 4 months, we moved in together. And we did some things, even though we had a conscious intention, even though we had ideas about what we really, really wanted in relationship. We moved quickly and did some things maybe that the relationship experts or Instagram coaches would say, don't do that, or slow things down, or be careful. And so I guess one of the things I want to convey is that nobody gets everything right, and that no matter how you start or how things are going, or how you spent the last 5, 10, 15 years, it doesn't mean that you can't make positive changes. It doesn't mean that you can't take the relationship in a direction that you want it to go. And I think some people fear that, oh, this happened, or we did things out of order, and maybe that means something bad about the relationship. And when we got together, even your previous partner dying presented an issue for me, which is like, oh, is it a good time for you? Or are you ready? Or do you want what I want? And I'd never been with someone who had been in that situation. Most people our age don't have the experience yet of losing their partner. Mm-hmm. And that presented some things for us to talk about and work through. And some of the challenges that we faced, we didn't even know we were going to face. It was still out of our awareness. It wasn't really something that we saw or felt or could sense. It was like waiting for us down the road.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, I don't know if I actually was ready because I was traumatized and I had so much come up around the death. It wasn't just about dealing with the death. It was dealing with all of the unprocessed aspects of my entire life. Yeah. And I was not centered. I was not regulated. So one could argue that I was not ready to get into a relationship with you, but I didn't have that awareness. I didn't have enough capacity or connection to myself to have that awareness. And that was just where I was at. But in getting in relationship with you, we stumbled and flailed and failed and also learned and grew and connected all at the same time. So, you know, I think it can maybe be easy. Oh, like maybe that was a mistake. But in hindsight, everything happened the way it was supposed to, I guess. And we did learn and grow through all of that. But it was a pretty wild time.
Yeah, no doubt. So, you know, what I think I want to convey here is like what I've seen and noticed from our experiences, even though you can have things that are heavy going on, you can have challenges, you can have unresolved things from your past, you can have trauma or difficult experiences from childhood or previous relationships that maybe are incomplete, that you haven't really worked through, or you have a low level of awareness about, and that you can still work on these things. It can be a huge growth opportunity. And when people hear your story, and some of your friends, family, people that are close to you know intimate details of your experience and what you've wrestled with or what you've had to process. And I don't think that I had less issues. I'd like to believe that I did, but I think the truth is we actually both had things that were unresolved. And I think that people come together in that way, that they meet their match, their imago match, if we were to use a term from my therapy certification in the world that I'm in. But we pair with someone who's got a similar level of energy, intensity, even if it's pushed in an opposite direction. Sometimes that's the avoidant anxious dance, the minimizer maximizer thing. And that we meet a partner to help us grow, that we meet a partner who can help us essentially reclaim parts of ourselves, to make our weaknesses into strengths, and to learn a little bit more about what it takes to make something work.
Yeah, and I think early on we realized that we were each other's match in that way. And what I mean by that is how it showed up is us, I think, feeling like we were hitting roadblocks together of we're really struggling to work through these things that were coming up between us, because we were both pressing on each other's core wounds, and they were perfectly matched and fit together like a puzzle piece. Mm-hmm. And you can correct me if you don't think this is correct, but I feel like we were in it with each other for 3 years. And we really struggled sometimes to get our feet on the ground. We both questioned the relationship. We both were, had moments of I don't know if I can keep doing this. And, one thing we did keep going, we kept showing up to therapy, we kept showing up to clearing conversations. But I just remember that time of what felt like a washing machine of each other's trauma and being trauma bonded to a degree, because we couldn't get out of it. This cycle we were in of one of us gets triggered, the other gets triggered by the other person's triggered, and then the other person's triggered, and it's just on and on and on and on and on and on. And we couldn't snap out of it.
Yeah.
And, that was really hard. It was really challenging. And I might be jumping ahead too far, but I do remember what really started to shift us out of it, but maybe we don't go there yet. But
well, I'd love to talk about that in terms of what shifted us out of it, what worked for us, what are some of the things that might be relevant to other couples in terms of things that they could try. And there's something really important here when people see a photo of us together smiling, or a photo of us with our cute puppy Ava, and we're looking in that image happy, satisfied, like everything's all good, that us having those moments together us being able to capture those moments on camera, or even us be able to have a conversation now that's grounded and regulated and might contain a little bit of wisdom or a little bit of insight, or just the energy that, hey, we're okay and it's okay. And we're actually comfortable talking about things with each other. And even so, to do that publicly, that there's maybe a vulnerability to that, a courage, maybe a resilience. The point I'm trying to make here is that the fact that we have made progress with each other and we feel like we've made progress as individuals makes us feel satisfied. It makes us feel hopeful. And it builds that sense of resilience that we can handle things, we can work on things together. And a lot of couples are missing that, and they're feeling hopeless, and they're feeling shame about the challenges that they experienced, just like we have. We don't feel good when we're not okay. We don't feel good when we have an upset, a moment, we get tripped up, we hit a speed bump. And that feels negative, and it could bring up all kinds of stuff. So the point I'm making is, when we get to capture those moments where we're feeling good, it's not without the struggle. It's not without, hard work to get there. And I think there's a lot of bad ideas about relationships and culture, ideas that we have, that we learn from society, from school, from family systems, from previous relationships, and everyone else has the, same stuff going on. So saying all that, what are some of the things that worked for us in terms of working through the power struggle, working through, this intense phase of our relationship where we're getting tripped up, we're anxious about each other's differences?
Yeah. Well, everyone has, I think, every couple probably has a different degree of intensity of what that feels like, I'm assuming, right? Of course. I definitely had, PTSD symptoms alive in my system that when I would get triggered, I would dissociate. So just speaking from my end, taking my healing and growth seriously, like I see a somatic therapist regularly to this day. I see her, once a month now. But I continued showing up to my somatic therapy sessions, which is a slow titrated process of bringing, regulation and homeostasis back to your system from being in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. So over time, doing that work and starting to get a more resilient system, that really helped me, which then also helped us because my energy would be really big. My triggers would go outward towards you, and you'd have a reaction to that. So the less I was exploding and having these big reactions, that really helped the space between us because I wasn't putting that energy between us, and then you weren't reacting to my reaction. I was thinking about this last night, but starting to understand internal family systems work, which is, you brought Melina on. She talked a little bit about that in your episode. So it could be useful to, if you haven't listened to it, to go and listen to that part, because I probably won't explain it as well. But Richard Schwartz created the internal family system theory. And his theory is that we are not made up of one part. We're made up of multiple parts. There's our self energy. And then there are parts of us that get split off due to trauma or challenging events in our life. So when I started to really notice that there were these parts that would come online when I got triggered and hijack my system, and started to work with those parts with my therapist and with myself, that really started to transform things. And I feel like that was a tipping point between us as well, where we started to get out of that power struggle because I was putting less energy. My triggers weren't getting as big because I was able to self-regulate and self-soothe more.
Yeah. So I think a lot of couples struggle with this, and my side of the same pattern, if you were the one who explodes and gets big and exaggerates your energy or your emotions and what you're feeling, if you're the one that's saying, we need to talk about this, we need to do something, like you need to listen, or you need to do this, or we need to fix this issue, or I don't like what's happening right now, I would be the one who would implode, and I would get quiet, or I would withdraw, or I would just be inside of my own mind, thinking thoughts, wondering what to do, maybe doubting the relationship, fearing that things aren't going to work, and just inside of my own kind of shutdown. and turtle shell of my own experience. So you get loud, I get quiet, you want to talk about it, I want to take a break. And we both would have those responses with each other, which is related to our own past experience, our own trauma, our own hurts from childhood and experience in other relationships. And people who have listened to this show know that that's part of the avoidant anxious stance, that that's part of the minimizer maximizer pattern. And we have both sought counsel as individuals. We have both gone to therapy, and we have gone together. We've gone as a couple. We have listened to podcasts. We've read books. We have gone to workshops. We've done couples therapy sessions. And all of that has come together in a really powerful way, which doesn't mean we don't have disagreements, right? Which doesn't mean that we don't have moments where we don't see eye to eye, or one of us is, again, in the imploding or exploding.
Well, I think a good example that I think just relates to what I just shared is, it was like 2 days ago. Was it yesterday?
Yeah.
2 days ago, I think. We're in the car, something came up between us. And now in hindsight, I see exactly what happened. I had a part come up around something that was happening between us. Or you said something, I don't know. The details actually don't matter. I had a part come up. I could feel my heart beating faster. And I had a part up. So this part was the one that was triggered, activated, and expressing itself. And it was pretty much up for the whole car ride home. We were driving from a restaurant to our place. And by the time we got to our place, you had said something that I think gave me a moment to pause and realize that I had a part up. And that little pause allowed my heart rate to slow back down, for me to realize, oh, wow, I just had a part up, and then come back to my self energy. And later that day, I realized wow, it actually is now, because I'm more aware of it, so intense to feel when I have a part up, because it actually feels like there's some other being in me. It's not me. And I am exaggerating, but I think because I'm more aware of it, the difference between when I have a part up and when I'm regulated, grounded, and connected to myself and self energy is so big. It's whoa, it does feel like something else comes over me. Mm-hmm. And, we were able to come back to connection quite quickly, I would say, whereas before maybe it would take 48 hours or a couple days or a week until you and I were both feeling regulated and connected again. So I would say that's a win. But yeah, that happened 2 days ago.
Yeah. So just because we worked on things doesn't mean we don't get tripped up. But one of the things I'm constantly trying to convey to couples is that one of the goals here of working on things, one of the goals of working on your relationship, is shortening that time period of disconnection. Because what happens when you can come back to connection and understanding and a sense of calm, grounded centeredness in 45 minutes or an hour? Sometimes for us, it's 5 or 10 minutes instead of 7 days or 2 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks. And then basically at that point, someone's breaking up with the other or threatening a breakup and feeling really alone, feeling really isolated or trapped or abandoned in the situation. And that basically that's one of the main things that we've gotten to understand is, we want to feel connected. We want to feel close. We want to feel like everything's okay. And sometimes we struggle to create that with each other, which is a normal experience for all couples. Something negative happens, something bad happens, something we perceive as negative from our partner. And then, we feel disconnected. And part of the art here is understanding that we've got connection, disconnection, and repair. And so I want to talk about that because one of the most beautiful, powerful, heartwarming, fulfilling things for me in our relationship, and I believe that I do this to a high degree, but you do this, I recognize you as doing this, which is you are able to, at some point, after a minute, after an hour, take responsibility for your piece, your part, what you're contributing to this co-creation. And when we both are able to do that, or maybe one of us goes first, it only really takes one person to go first and say, hey, I'm noticing that I feel really afraid or I'm feeling really upset. And I think that there's this part of me that is really just feeling triggered right now. It's getting really worked up because of this thing from the past, or I don't want this to happen. And I'm having such an intense response to that. And I see how the way that I spoke to you is not how I want to be. And you don't deserve that from me. And, you know, what I really want is this. And here's something maybe you need to understand about me. This is why this is so sensitive. That when we're able to do that and own that with like I statements, instead of being like, well, you did this, you're the problem, you always do this, that we can come back to that state of connection, that sense that we're on the same team. And I really love that. And I feel like I say that to you all the time, that I just like the most important thing, the thing that means the most to me is that you're able to take responsibility for what comes up for you. And if there's a moment where I'm having a hard time doing that, the times where you go first and say, hey, I'm really seeing this about myself, it's an invitation for me too, to reflect and take ownership and awareness, instead of being in a defensive position where I'm focused on being right, or I don't want to be wrong, or I don't want you to be right. And I think that's a big deal for everybody that wants to be successful in their pursuit of a long-term romantic relationship.
And I feel like, you know, the ability to take that pause and have some moment of, oh, is a big piece of it. And I think a lot of people don't have access to that pause, because if you get triggered, if you have a part up, it's really hard until you come down a bit, the energy comes down, and come back to yourself to be able to have that awareness of taking responsibility of, this is my part. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that is a big piece that I would assume a lot of people struggled with. I struggled it. You did. We did. And I don't really know what my point is here, but I feel like for me, that's where the nervous system piece, getting support somatically, getting support with having more access to a pause where I can self-regulate, made the world of a difference to be able to take responsibility and then change the shape of our dynamic in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So part of this conversation, part of this recent moment, the speed bump that we hit of disconnection, was that we were in the car and there was a subject matter. But being in the car, I hear this so often from couples that they get into disagreements in the car, frustrating situations, ideas about how things should be done, how fast they should drive, etc. But also that there can just be emotional material from the relationship that comes up when they're in the car. And I have a couple of theories about this and like to hear your thoughts, but I just want to say this while we're on the subject. In the vehicle, two people are facing the same direction. So the couple is in the car, they're not making eye contact. The driver is focused on the road. The driver is focused on getting from A to B safely. And they really do have a higher priority than listening. It is actually more important that they are looking at the stop signs, stopping at the red lights, paying attention to dynamics on the road. That actually is a more important thing than listening to their partner who's in the passenger seat. And I hope that you would agree that if you're in the driver's seat or I'm in the driver's seat, that, okay, it's important that we keep each other physically safe and alive, but we get into these moments where we don't hear each other because we're not making eye contact, we're not slowing down, we're distracted, or at least one of us is not able to fully pay attention because of this priority, this self-preserving, priority of staying alive, staying safe, making sure nobody gets hurt and we don't hurt anybody else. And there's something really important there about slowing things down and making eye contact and turning towards each other when you have these moments of upset, when the tension starts increasing. I also have a second piece to this, which is I think couples fight in the car because when they were young, they witnessed their family have disagreements in the car. And it could have just been with one parent. Could have been that everybody was in the car together and the parents were bickering or talking about something or trying to agree about how to manage logistics, how to manage the family, how to manage life, or they're just in a power struggle dynamic. And that we have a tendency to recreate negative scenes from our childhood now in our adult life. And I think that there are some complicated factors that come together to create these moments for people in the vehicle. So I'm just saying that so that couples are aware that there could be more happening in the car than they realize, that they're set up for failure if they're trying to solve important issues, solve problems in the vehicle. And some of us want to speed home and get out of the car if we're with our partner in a negative situation. And one of the things that we do is try and slow things down. So if we have that moment in the vehicle, try and take a few deep breaths, try and get curious about what's happening, trying to remember that, we're in the vehicle. At least this is part of my process, is like I'm remembering, okay, like we're in the car. We have a tendency sometimes to get into things in the vehicle. How can I be more mindful? How can I bring more kindness? How can I try and be a better listener? Or how can I let you know as my partner that if I'm driving, I'm not fully available right now. You're really important to me. I want to talk about this. I want to hear more about this conversation and what matters. And I'm also noticing that I'm stressed out because we're running late, or that most of my attention is really on the road right now. And maybe we could pull over, or maybe we could, when we get home, we could talk about this. And like, would that be okay? Working together with you instead of pretending I'm available. And when I pretend I'm available, you sense immediately that I'm not. You feel my presence or you don't. So I can't make it up, even though sometimes I would like to because it's convenient, because I don't want to upset you or I don't want to create more conflict. So it's better just to pretend that I'm listening, pretend that I'm available, maybe solve or fix the situation now so that it's done and over with. There's all kinds of reasons that, I get myself into trouble or I make things more difficult with you because of my adaptations, because of the way that I might squirm under tension. And when I talk with people about this, with couples, they can see these things going on with them. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
The only thought I have is, you shared some helpful things you can do if you're getting into conflict in the car. And I just thought it was funny that we didn't really do any of those things in that moment. We were both so inside of our own adaptations that, it was once we parked the car and stopped driving when the energy started to come down. And then once we got in the house, we had repaired. Yeah. But I just find it kind of funny that, when we're triggered, when we're in our stuff, like that is the absolute hardest time to apply the principles that you might intellectually know. Yeah.
Well, one thing I did in the vehicle was that I stopped talking and I got quiet.
That's true.
Which when I get quiet and I stop talking and I disengage, that can, for you or for other people, be triggering because they can feel like their partner's gone away, that they are not there, that they feel alone, they feel abandoned in the moment, and now their partner's punishing them with silence, giving them a silent treatment. And when I got quiet in the car, one thing that I was thinking was, okay, this is a moment of tension. I need to be very mindful and careful about what I say. And this is why talking is one of the most dangerous things that couples do, because when we don't say anything, when we say something, it can bring something up for the other. And we can really get ourselves into, a world of hurt because of how we communicate, of how we share. And, I think that I do sometimes make those mistakes still, where I'll say something in the wrong way or in the wrong tone. Mm-hmm. And I like talking about this because I want people to understand that even though we aspire to be a successful couple, even though we identify as practicing conscious relationship, that doesn't mean that we're perfect. That doesn't mean that we get everything right all the time, but it means that we talk about it, that we understand that mistakes are going to happen, and that we're able to forgive each other, that we're able to be curious with each other, we're able to empathize with each other's position, and make a commitment to doing better, doing our best, learning what we need to learn. And also remembering that part of the whole thing is just about growth in the first place. Part of the fact that conflict comes up for couples is that there are important growth opportunities inside of all of these moments. And that's something that I took to heart from my couples therapy training, but discovered that it is true, not just because someone said it, but actually I experienced that to be true in my exploration, in my process with you. And I think that you've found the same thing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I think you just mentioned the word curiosity. And I feel like on my end, because the way my adaptations show up is big energy, big triggers, big feelings, big emotions. And it can and did, I do say this with compassion, but it would create like a self-absorption, and there would be zero curiosity or space for you because I'd be so in my experience, and my experience was really big. So I feel like one of my biggest growth opportunities and what's really been useful for us is me, as I've started to develop my ability to self-regulate, self-soothe, is also then lead into curiosity about what's happening for you. What's your experience, and getting curious about you instead of having it all be about me and my experience. And it's still a growth edge for me because it's a deep pattern. It's, I'm 34 years old. Have 34 years of practice in this pattern. And I know you and I talk about how changing our patterns can feel like heavy lifting, like lifting the heaviest weight in the gym, because if you think about it, it's, we are up against our family's lineage. Like we inherited our patterns from our parents, and then they got it from their parents and their parents, and so on, so on, so on. So when you think of it that way, it's like you are facing just your entire lineage in that pattern. So, I guess I'm just speaking to that's big. Was my biggest growth edge, and just how hard it can feel, and just want to validate how hard it can be when we're trying to shift these patterns. It's obviously, of course, it's possible, but I'm getting a little bit off track. But curiosity.
Yeah. No, it's a big deal for sure. And it's one of the hardest things to do when you're feeling hurt, stressed, or upset. We've talked about this on the show before, that there's this phrase called emotional symbiosis, which is really just saying that when we're hurt, stressed, upset, we go naturally into a protective response. And when we go into a protective response, we are self-absorbed. We're thinking all about us. We're not thinking about the other. We're not thinking about our partner. And when that happens, we lose sense of other people. We lose sense of our partner. And it's so easy for people to live permanently in that state that, I'm in pain and it's all about me, and you don't see me, and you don't do this, and you're not that, and I wish you were more this. And it just really is like the fuel of the power struggle. So there's one thing that we've practiced specific to Imago, which is the dialogue. And it's this structured format that sometimes I feel like we should use, or we ought to use, or it's the right way to do things. And in other moments you've said, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want you to listen to me. And we've been able to put together a few different, perspectives and techniques to examine our power struggle experience, to work through the conflicts and things that come up. But practicing that structured technique of talking and listening, sending and receiving, I think has really made a huge difference for us, because we don't need to do it all the time now. It actually becomes a little bit more of an organic way of relating. And it's something more that we have embodied, which is really all about curiosity, all about turning off our own TV channel just to hear from the other person for a bit. And I wonder if you have any, pieces of wisdom, or just any parts of your experience of that might be helpful for to couples listening in terms of dialogue? And have you taken anything away from practicing that technique with me? Or is it just like nails on a chalkboard and the worst thing ever?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I mean, the first thing I thought about is one of the mistakes we made was doing a dialogue when we were both triggered or had parts up. Mm-hmm. And I remember, we would get in dialogue, and now I can look back and be like, oh, I was totally offline. Like I had a part up, I was triggered. And it makes sense that sometimes the dialogue, I maybe wouldn't feel better after it, even if we went through the processes, because I didn't have access to myself, access to presence, to the moment, to connection. But that being said, when we did do the dialogues and, there wasn't much of a charge online when we did them, I think what was so great is you're forced to listen to your partner. So it's almost like a forced curiosity, a forced getting out of your experience to listen to your partner, because that's how the dialogue is structured. And I think that is what really helped us, because of the structure, it allowed for more information to come through about each other. Like we had to listen to our partner's experience and the why behind it. And I think that's what's been extremely useful, because there's then an accountability piece that comes in because you see why your partners may be acting that way. And I think it can foster the connection piece, because then you're seeing, again, I keep saying it, but the why behind they're so triggered, or this conflict is such a big deal. There's so much energy coming up.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. One is that it's not always a good time for a dialogue, and that it might be a great technique. People listening to this, some of my own clients maybe have used it, learned it, but it's not always a good time to talk about what you want to talk about. So be mindful of that. And consent is a big deal. So just because you want to talk about something, or just because I want to talk about something, doesn't mean that it is a good time. And we need to be mindful of our self-absorption, of our narcissism when approaching our partner to say, hey, I want to talk to you. We do sometimes just barge into the room or approach our partner with blah, 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 without asking, hey, are you available? Especially if it's like important, vulnerable, personal, stuff that we want to work on or work through. Even logistical requests can sometimes make our partner feel like they don't matter, their experience doesn't matter, they're just being steamrolled and they have to submit to this conversation right now, or else.
Yeah, something I used to do is I would sometimes have triggers or things that were bothering me come up at nighttime or right when I woke up. And I used to, maybe we're falling asleep, start talking about something like really important to me. And you would get triggered. Is that safe to say?
Yeah.
And it makes sense because you're not available. You're falling asleep, or you literally just woke up and you haven't had a coffee. And so I'm just circling back to, that's another reason why dialogues is important, because maybe you would have a reaction, but you would still communicate, I care about what's important to you. I care. So can you schedule this with me, instead of blurting it out at like whatever time we're going to bed or right when we wake up?
Yeah.
And slowly, I mean, that hasn't happened in a really long time. So that's another way that dialogue really supported us.
This is a really, really common experience where one partner is bringing up issues first thing in the morning or late at night in bed as they're falling asleep. And what some couples do is they end up having a couple hour, 2, 3, 4 hour circular, repetitive conversation, really getting nowhere. The tension and stress escalates and they're not getting any resolution. Then they lose sleep. Then they spend the next day thinking about how they lost sleep, and now they're feeling tired and low energy and feeling like their relationship is a negative experience. So I think that a lot of people will be able to relate to what you're saying. And part of the wisdom of that, even though we're talking specifically about this moment of bringing things up, is really just about boundaries, which is that how can I, with my close, intimate partner, say, I love you, you're my favorite person, you are important, and this conversation is important, but I'm not available right now. Can we talk about it later? Can we talk about this after dinner or tomorrow morning? And then you be able to, for example, receive that, even though you're maybe feeling big emotion, And, can I honor your experience and can you honor mine? Can we do that simultaneously? Can we work together in that way? And I think that's a really, really fundamental and profound insight that many couples discover from working on their relationship.
Mm-hmm. And I'll admit that sometimes when that has come up in the past, I would be annoyed because I want to talk about it now. But again, yeah, that's where me learning how to self-regulate and self-soothe and take care of self-process. I mean, that was just a game changer.
Yeah. So some people listening to this conversation might not know anything about dialogue. And if you want to learn how, you and I actually walk people and teach people. We've done a demo on this in our program, Romantic Relationship Reset, on how to dialogue. We have scripts and everything you need to know about how to use it. So just a note, if you're listening, you can check that out. One thing here related to this talking is dangerous is that I feel that, especially when we got together, and really now this is true, is that your strengths are more in your emotional body in terms of your intuition, and you feel things strongly and you sense things clearly. And I'm more in my logic, and that I can say, well, logically, this is how it should be done. And this makes sense. And we both can feel like our perspectives are right. We can both feel like, not at the same time, we can feel like our experience is the right experience. My perspective is the right perspective. And if people listening are in a relationship where they've got that going on, that this is pretty normal, is that one person's strengths are more in their emotional world. And like even in our relationship, I think you would agree that when it comes to getting things done or problem solving, especially when we've got a lot going on, that I'm able to like logically be like, boom, boom, boom. Okay, here's how we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And you acknowledge that's one of my strengths.
Mm-hmm. Is that definitely, fair? Absolutely.
And I acknowledge that your sense of things, your feeling into things is one of your strengths. And we have gotten into situations in the past where you would sense and feel that, I don't know if this is the best thing for us. I'm not sure if we should do this. I'm not sure that, this is the right approach. And I would meet your sensing with my logic and my thinking and try to talk you into, my perspective, which is really just me wanting to get things done in the way that I want it done, for you to see the world the way that I see it, to conveniently bypass any of the big emotions or things that are coming up and just like take a logical approach. And that's really gotten me into trouble. It's gotten us into situations where things felt negative. Mm-hmm. And when I look back on some of those moments, if I had been more mindful or I had been more attuned to your emotional experience, instead of trying to meet it with my logic, actually just sense more into what you're saying and get more curious about that and slow things down and not be in such a rush, that we actually would have avoided certain moments, which could be around trips, how long to stay somewhere, how many nights to stay with family, how to spend our money, how to do this or that you had important wisdom and perspective, that your way is really, really actually smart and wise as well as mine. And I wish in some of those moments over the last 5-6 years that we had really worked more together in that way.
Absolutely. And my opportunity in those moments was to feel like I had a voice and to, essentially stand up against you, because I would allow myself to be talked into. I don't know if that's the right phrasing, but I would allow. It's like
I'd persuade you.
Yeah, I would submit to what you were saying logically.
Yeah.
And it's just so clear there that my biggest growth edge was to feel like I'm allowed to share what's true for me. I'm allowed to honor what I'm feeling and know that that's not going to threaten the connection. Because deep, deep, deep down, the reason why I was allowing you to persuade me was because of my deep wound of, bad things happen when I use my voice. I'm not allowed to say no. I'm not allowed to have needs and wants. I'm not allowed to have boundaries. Like actually the threat's quite big. It's a deep old pattern.
Yeah. And if you don't do what I want you to do, then there could be consequences. I could take my love away, could take my approval away.
Yeah. It's about the loss of love, loss of connection, and the fear of the energy that might come back to me if I say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like, is it okay to say no? Is it okay for me to want what I want? And what happens if I draw a line in the sand? What happens if I stand up for myself? Will my partner be okay with that? Will they be able to accept it? And
yeah, it's that pattern has gotten us into some trouble, some small trouble, some big trouble. And what's, I guess, kind of neat, though, is that pattern has really shown me like a deep part of me, regardless outside of our relationship, that needs developing. Mm-hmm. You know, like it. And I think that's the beauty of relationship, is that when we're in relationship with someone, our patterns get so amplified. And there's a gift in that, because it shows where our personal work is. It's, you know, out as a human in the world, not just in relation to our partner.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm thinking about a workshop I was running recently where somebody typed in the chat a quote from Eckhart Tolle, which is basically that relationships are not meant to make you happy. They're meant to make you grow. Mm. And I really feel that romantic relationship is a personal growth machine. Mm. It's just that we don't like the way that feels sometimes. And my experience of relationship really throughout my life is that there are big waves and scary moments in the open sea of relationship. And couples need to learn how to steer that ship into a safe harbor. And I think everyone struggles to do that from time to time. But I think that our journey together, at least for us, has created more hope and perspective that, like, oh, totally possible. And there are definitely some clear things not to do. And every couple needs to agree on, you know, what these things are. And so maybe in closing, we could talk a little bit about relationship vision, and something that you and I did together, which I recommend all couples do. I'm constantly talking about how it's one of the main reasons that relationships fail is that we don't have a vision, we're not clear about that, or we lose it along the way. Do you feel anything in particular about the fact that we've got a relationship vision on the wall? Is that important to you in any way? And, you know, how so?
Oh, I love it. I think, you know, we created a relationship vision. I got a mutual friend of ours to create art out of it, and then we framed it. So it's framed really beautifully beside our bed. And I had never really thought about relationship vision until you and I got together. And it makes so much sense. And again, I think Melina our somatic therapist might have said it in your previous episode, but something she said to us in one of our therapy sessions was, love isn't enough. And I feel like that's such a big point. Like, it's not enough in relationship. So what I think relationship vision brings in is what is important, like what is enough, like what is keeping us together. That's not just about, oh, I love them, I love you.
Yeah.
And I think getting specific and getting clear and starting to think about, like, why are we together is everything. I mean, I feel like that's what's going to continue to carry, I'll speak from us, like us forward. And that relationship vision and our purpose can shift and can change. But I think it's safe to say one of our purposes for being together is growth and healing. And mapping that out in the vision, just having that solidified on paper in art, I think has just been really helpful. Yeah. It's been a nice orientation point to like orient to.
Yeah. And I think that it can be for some people feel like maybe just paying lip service, like, oh yeah, like we're going to do this or we're going to do that, or here's like some exciting idea, or here are the commandments and the biblical rules of our relationship. But actually the vision means nothing if you don't keep it in mind, if you don't hold yourself accountable to that, if you don't actually think about, how am I being? How am I thinking? How am I acting? How am I actually in service of this vision? And are we working together on that, or have we lost sight? And I think in many moments, couples do lose sight of their vision, even if they have one. But most couples are not guided by that at all. And they don't really have a mindful, intentional, vision of being together. One thing that I've joked with you about in our relationship is like, be careful what you wish for, because I had an intention coming in that, above all things, growth and our personal truths are like the most important thing. That above all else, what I value is like, okay, what's true for you? What's true for me? And part of that aspiration to grow and be better and learn more about myself has also been difficult and painful. And so I said I wanted something. I said that I wanted to grow in my relationship. And then the way that showed up for me, the way that it felt some days, was not nice and was really excruciating. And I think that many people look at the personal development space or conscious relationship work and hope that it's going to be, a fun, exciting, uplifting experience of love and life, that we're going to take a pill or have an experience where we have no suffering at all. And it's just this honeymoon phase kind of myth that we're going
to be in some like magical ritual ceremony together all the time. Or,
yeah.
I just have to bring up the story. I think it's okay that I share it. One of our very first big blow ups, this was like, I don't know, a couple months into our relationship, or I had moved in at this point. And I remember you muttering like, so much for conscious relationships. So good.
Yeah. It would have been a dismissive comment that I would have made. Yeah.
I think it's just speaking to that. I agree. Careful what you wish for, because I think the word conscious gets glamorized, but when you think about it, making the unconscious conscious is not pretty.
Yeah.
That's not roses and ceremony and ritual. And no, like it's gnarly.
Yeah. It's not like chocolates and red wine every night. No. Yeah. Well, I think that's what I'm talking about, is like when you see things about yourself that you see more about yourself, it doesn't mean you're only going to see good things. You're going to notice things maybe you've been in denial about, that you've been avoiding. You're going to see things you haven't seen before. You're going to feel things and experience things about yourself that maybe you're not proud of, as your awareness heightens, as you see more of how you respond in conflict, more of how you fail to show up in certain moments, to be there with your partner or for your partner. And some of that stuff honestly just makes you sick to your stomach. Mm-hmm. And you can feel badly and go into a shame spiral about that and beat yourself up. And over time, we've definitely developed more of that resilience that I was talking about earlier to handle those big waves, rocky waters.
Yeah, to that point, I feel like one of the things that wasn't useful for us is we would over process and almost be in process and talk too much. And I know we've already touched on that, but my point is, I think our work as a couple, we've been so focused on growth and becoming conscious, we sometimes have forgotten about play and like having fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's something. Now we're in a stage in our relationship where that's actually one of the most important things, is bringing more fun, aliveness, and play. And I feel like that's what our next chapter is really focused on. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I think when you're in the work together, sometimes you can lose sight of that part of the relationship, which is so important, which is play and fun and not over processing, because we definitely did, and it wasn't good.
Yeah. So don't do that. I think that's an important point. We want to work on things. We aspire to be a highly successful, conscious couple, and that there are some potential pitfalls people can make, which is being hypersensitive about everything, processing everything all the time with each other, not having other outlets, friend groups, communities, sisterhoods, brotherhoods, therapy, individually or in a group, that there needs to be other things that support our relationship, so that we're not constantly burdening each other with our process, with my childhood wound and all the things that are coming up. Because if we're constantly a burden to one another, things can feel pretty heavy, feel negative. But we can't also not be a burden to each other ever, because that's what being together is like, I'm a burden to you and you're a burden to me. We're needy little creatures and we want things all the time. And we are sensitive to stuff and we do have our triggers, but there is a somewhere in the middle, there is a balance to be struck. And I think that's always, we're kind of swinging the pendulum always over that line of balance, but trying to maintain that so the swings aren't too huge, that we don't get these massive oscillations in our relationship that create more volatility and upset and turbulence, and create more of a steady holding pattern like everyone likes to fly at in a plane, just cruising altitude. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there more?
No, would you agree that kind of the next things we're focusing on would be joy, play, aliveness?
Yeah, it's a big deal because I can be like a serious sort of dad character where I'm, in the work or constantly holding space for other people. And I can be very in my head, very logical and serious about life or goals or thinking about what's next or what needs to be done next. And sometimes missing that sense of play and joyfulness and aliveness. I think that I have a good sense of humor, but it's easy as an adult for me to get bogged down in the minutia of daily experience, of to-do lists, of groceries, of taking care of the dog. And for people that have kids, it's even more intense because you feel like you're a full-time Uber driver and you're constantly going from one thing to the next and, trying to keep the family afloat.
Yeah. Something I think that we've done recently, which I've really enjoyed, I'll speak for myself, has been planning connection dates, once a week, twice a week. And it's space for us. Yeah. Something to connect, to read, to talk. I think that's can be useful when things are feeling like heavier or there's a big to-do list or, lots going on. Just the importance of prioritizing that connection time, whatever that looks like or means to the couple, even if it's just once a week or once every 2 weeks, whatever is available.
Yeah. And I think there's a growth edge there for couples, which is like, if we make a connection date in the calendar and we slow things down, what are we doing? Are we going for a walk? If we're sitting and connecting with each other, how do we facilitate that? Do we do a dialogue? Do we read a book? Do we just share openly about our experience for 15 minutes at a time and just let each other more into each other's worlds in terms of what we're thinking about? And there is really no shortage of potential options. What I've noticed for me is that when I take time to slow down and connect with you and hear about your experience and for you to hear about mine, I feel more connected. I feel more understood. I feel more of the sense that I want to be close with you, which could lead to sex, which could lead to different activities. It could lead to massage. It could lead to stretching, going to yoga, going for a steam, whatever. But I think there's an important thing to note there for couples if they feel disconnected, if they feel like maybe they've lost some of the depth or the excitement or the connection that they started with, that part of the solution could actually be in the slowing down, dropping in together, and there can be resistance to that. There can be subtle feelings like, oh, I don't want to do this, or I'd rather repaint the house. I'd rather do the laundry than, sit and connect with my partner. But in that slowing down and connecting through a fun activity or a book or learning or sharing, that there really is something profound and important about those moments, because we can have a glass of wine, watch a great movie, go out with friends, go to some fun experience, but it isn't always that level of quality of connection, of slowness.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say also is, slowing down and making space for more pleasure and connection and presence. And I think especially in long-term relationships, something I hear, I am just building my practice as a somatic sex coach. What I hear, some folks saying is they're, missing that desire, that sexual desire in their relationship that's gone. And this will probably be a separate episode because we can talk for an hour about this. But I think what I'll just say is what you're saying can be useful is not focusing on, I want more sex, but how do we slow down and make time for quality connection with each other that revolves around pleasure, where we're present.
Yeah.
And, there's different exercises and games and things that we've done together and things that I've learned that can support clients with that, where it's all about physical touch and creating pleasure with no goal. And I think those exercises, those practices, it's like really helpful for the long-term connection and health and of the couple.
Yeah. Well said. Mm-hmm. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, just their relationships are super psychedelic and
they are. Yeah.
They're so psychedelic, and I am honestly a different human than I was 5-6 years ago when we met. Like, I am a different human, and that is a testament to our connection.
Yeah.
100%. The work we've done together, the ways we've failed, the wins we've experienced. I feel different completely, and it's because for the better.
Yeah.
And it's because of our relationship, the container of our relationship, the vessel.
Well, I feel like I've changed a lot too, and appreciate you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate you too.
Being a teammate in my growth and development. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
Or I'll just keep rambling.
Got it. Where can people find you on Instagram?
You can find me at my handle is Alissa, ALISSA.Hansen, HANSEN. And I am posting somatic sex coaching content on there. And you can find me there.
And you have a workshop coming up in February?
I do. I'm hosting a workshop called Embodied Pleasure on Saturday, February 15th at 12 p.m. Pacific time. So I'm going to be guiding folks through somatic practices, and some of those will be pleasure-based as well. And if you're interested and don't really know what somatic sex coaching is, it'd be a great way to get an introduction to the work.
Awesome. I love it. Well, hopefully some people will take you up on the offer. If anybody's looking for support on relationships, you can reach out to myself and or Alissa, and we're happy to put you in the right direction. That could be working with us, could be working with someone else, but we're really just allies in couples healing, growth, and development. So we'll get you any resources that we feel have been helpful for us. Alissa, I love you. Thanks for coming on the show.
I love you too.
We'll have to have you back very soon.
Sounds good.